Is the February 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee. And tonight, we're going to have a short meeting and then a public hearing on the energy aggregation plan that this committee has been working on for many months. I'll call the roll. Councillor Kate Cook.
Here.
Kevin Charette.
Here.
Tom Rooney.
Here.
Ben D'Antonio.
Present.
And Allison Tanner.
Here.
Excuse me. We do have some past minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read those? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do you want both of them together, or do you want to do them separately?
Let's do them separately.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of Wednesday, January 18th, 2023.
Seconded.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we're looking for a motion for the next set of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, January 25th, 2023.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our next order of business is to open a public hearing on the Portsmouth Energy Aggregation Plan. In order to take advantage of RSA 53E, which is the Community Power Act, each city or municipal or town has to have its own energy aggregation plan, which requires 2 public hearings before going to the governing body. In our case, we're going to have a hearing tonight, and we're going to have a hearing a week from tonight, February 9th, if you're watching at home and have input you'd like to give. There's 2 more opportunities. There'll be a city council work session, February 13th. That's designed to educate the council before they vote on February 21st. And February 21st will be a vote to consider and approve the energy aggregation plan. And that's the major step in our timeline, which we'll hear about tonight, to develop a community power program. Just 1 minute of remarks. We all know that we pay a lot for our electricity. Some would say too much for our electricity. And we all know that the electricity we buy is by and large fossil fuels driven. And it's been this committee's work, this committee's quest, in a sense, to see if we can use RSA 53E to aggregate our residential and business demand as a city, enter the power markets, and see if we can get more competitive supply of power and more of that power that's renewably powered. And this committee's done wonderful work, and it's a very good committee, examining all the ways that we could do community power. We looked at the broker model, which is in use in Keene and other cities, and then we looked at joining the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, which we found to have significant advantages. CPC&H is now comprised of 27 towns. It's a nonprofit by communities, for communities, and will enable a lot of the cities and towns in the state to aggregate their residential and business demand and get more competitive rates and get more renewables. The EAP that we have will outline all of the steps the city would take as a partner and member of the coalition. And I think that you'll see tonight what we believe are substantial benefits. And the last thing I'd say is there are benefits for the short term. We think in better rates, and those will not be dramatically better rates, maybe in the 5 to 7.5% range. But we'll also be able to meet the demand that we know from doing surveys of the community is there to buy green power and make a difference in how you operate your house and how you buy your electricity. And right now, the majority of people are not taking advantage of ways to do that because it's cumbersome and hard, and this can make that much easier and help move us as a city towards our sustainability goals. So with that, we're going to have a presentation about community power, and we're happy to welcome Henry Herndon from the Community Power Coalition.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Tabor. I'm Henry Herndon. I'm a consultant with Community Power Coalition, New Hampshire, and I'll be providing an overview of the Portsmouth Electric Irrigation Plan and community power more broadly in the statewide nonprofit coalition that is supporting those 27 towns that were mentioned by Councilor Tabor. And are we going to have, I guess the presentation will be live here. Great. So I think that was a really excellent summary and sort of introduction and overview. Before we dive into the meat of what is the electric irrigation plan and what will Portsmouth Community Power be, I will just note that presently 8 members of the coalition, there are 4 in the Upper Valley: Hanover, Lebanon, Plainfield, Enfield, a couple neighbors here in the Seacoast, including Rye and Exeter, and then a couple others over in the Monadnock region, Peterborough and Walpole. They are all primed and ready to initiate some of the first programs in the state this spring, and to commence service and begin providing cheaper electric rates to the collective residents and businesses. And Portsmouth is positioned, along with a number of other communities, including potentially Durham, Dover, the city of Nashua, town of Harrisville, to be fast followers and could potentially commence service later this spring, with other opportunities after that to start the actual program. So just in terms of timing and in the commencement of these programs, that's a little bit of background there. Beyond that, there are the additional 15 members of the coalition that are likely to bring their programs online within the next year or so, and more likely in the spring of 2024. Yeah, we can start moving through some of the content here. So we'll talk about what is community power. We'll talk about the electric aggregation plan. We'll talk about the nonprofit statewide coalition, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the timeline. Oh, that's helpful. That's great. Thank you, Kevin. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So as was described, these are programs that pool or aggregate the collective buying power of customers within a municipality, with the objective of lowering electric costs and creating more access for renewable energy, as has been discussed. This is all made possible under a recent update to New Hampshire legislation, RSA 53E. And the intent is really to further democratize and expand local control over energy decision-making, so cities and towns really have a say in what they want to achieve with their energy procurement and with their energy decisions. So local control, access to markets, and to create more opportunities and create space for innovation. Essentially, community power is allowing each city or town to become the default electricity provider. So there are 3 aspects of this. The first is that economy of scale, that bulk power procurement, where the collective residents and businesses come together, they get buying power in the market, and they have greater choice in how they want to exercise that buying power. Importantly, the utility company, Eversource, will continue to own and operate the distribution grid. They'll deliver the power. They will ensure grid reliability. They will continue to be compensated for that core and essential service, and that remains largely unchanged. So the customer still gets the bill from Eversource. The only difference is the actual source of the power is now up to the decisions of the community. And the final piece is the the benefits that can accrue, and that could be anything from the lower rates, which we see demonstrated in other markets, but then giving more of a menu of options, so any individual resident could choose through Portsmouth Community Power, maybe I want to choose the 50% or the 100% green power option. There are also opportunities for the city over time through the coalition to begin to source power from local generators or develop local clean energy projects to then provide power to the Portsmouth Community Power portfolio. And we see other markets really driving innovation. So things like energy storage or programs for electric vehicle charging. These are some of the longer term potential benefits that we expect to realize through Portsmouth Community Power and other programs, if that is a motivating factor for the community. I discussed some of these, but just to reiterate briefly, the benefits really being local control and giving communities a seat at the decision-making table of what they want to achieve with their energy procurements. We see the other states demonstrating lower electric rates through these programs. We see the greater ability to have communities say in development of local clean energy generation that has an economic benefit within the state or within the community, and some of those innovations I mentioned. There's a lot of exciting things going on in the power sector in terms of using new technologies, using battery storage, using data and price signals, time of use rates, and these things can all be a mechanism to give customers greater control, to empower customers with new technologies and resources that will lower costs collectively for everyone. And those things can be made readily available through the development of these programs over time. And I will just note that the Portsmouth plan makes clear that this program will only launch if it is able to initially offer residential default rates that are lower than or competitive with Eversource. So there's a control in there to ensure that at launch the program will have lower electric rates. I'll just spend a moment on why these programs can deliver lower rates. So the utility is it's encumbered by a regulated procurement schedule. The state and the regulators require that Eversource goes and buys power twice a year at fixed points in time. That's cumbersome. It prevents the utility from taking advantage of favorable market conditions. And other competitive entities or unregulated entities can have a more nimble approach to buying power. They can manage a portfolio of different contracts that they choose to enter into at different times. This is the approach the coalition or community power can take advantage of. And other entities like the New Hampshire Electric Co-op are a good sort of model of demonstrating this kind of approach as consistently delivering rate savings. So into sort of what it looks like from a customer perspective. We all get an electric bill here in Portsmouth from Eversource, and that bill is broken into two portions: electricity supply, shown in the blue on the left, and then the delivery, shown in the green on the right. The delivery charge is the Eversource charge, that's the poles and wires. That remains entirely unchanged. Right now, anyone can choose where they want their energy supply to come from. Any individual customer can make that choice, and there are advantages to that. This program provides a layer of sort of consumer protection and the ability to give those benefits to all of the residential customers that are typically only used by larger energy users. So if we go to the next slide, this is sort of the next page of the bill, and it breaks down that supply versus delivery. And really the only thing that changes from a customer perspective is instead of Eversource being the default electricity supplier, now Portsmouth Community Power has a say in where that power comes from, and that will be represented on the bill for the customers.
Henry, just one, folks are looking at this bill, it's old, and the supply component on our electric bill is certainly more than the distribution side now. So if you went back to the prior slide, it shows distribution as being $83 and supply being $62. And in today's environment, that's kind of, it flops. Because supply, the rates have gone up so significantly in New Hampshire.
Right. That's a good point. So some of that material could be updated. But yeah, we're in a pretty high price environment right now. And it's also a pretty advantageous time to implement one of these programs because of the sort of high price environment that the utility is stuck in right now. Prices are going to fall this spring, and it's a good time to enter the market as we sort of come out of this really high-priced environment. So there's an opportunity for customer savings, particularly in the spring timeframe this year. Next. So I'm just going to reiterate some of the key points. Eversource owns the grid, delivers the power. That remains unchanged. And this plan, if approved by City Council, will authorize but not require the City Council to implement the program. It will authorize the City Council to enter into contracts with the service providers, if they would choose, to carry the program forward and implement it. And then, again, participation is voluntary. Any individual customer can choose at any point in time not to participate and opt out. So prior to enrollment, they can choose not to participate, go to a website or call a customer service line or a number of other mechanisms. And then even after the program is live, they can leave with no fee or penalty at the end of their monthly billing cycle. So that's a summary of the broader community power approach, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the electric aggregation plan. So under the RSA, the City Council is required to create a committee that develops and prepares a plan and brings that through with public hearings, which is what has occurred here. And the City Council tasked this committee with preparing that plan, which is available online for review. And this is the first of the 2 public hearings described by Councilor Tabor. Some key points. This is laying out the broader goals and objectives of the program. It defines the governance and, gives City Council the authority to have governance and oversight over this program, and summarizes how it would be implemented. There's some regulatory and legal requirements. You have to treat all customers fairly and equally in the same customer classes. You have to meet certain environmental requirements under state law. There's a minimum renewable energy requirement that you have to meet. You have to describe how you will address things like net metering customers who own rooftop solar generation, and they feed some of that electricity back into the grid, as well as customers on electric assistance programs. These are folks who are income qualified to receive a discount on their electricity rates. They, as described in the program, can continue to receive those discounts, and their benefits there will not be affected by this program. And then, importantly, the plan doesn't commit the city to doing anything. It just gives the city the authority to implement a program if it finds it is in the best long-term interests of the community. I'll also note there's no financial commitment, so these programs are not, under law, they're not allowed to be funded by taxpayer dollars. They are funded rather through the sale of electricity, through the electricity rate. So participating customers pay for that electricity rate. The vast majority goes to pay for the energy supply, and then there are portions of that energy supply charge, whether you're buying it from Eversource, whether you're buying it from a competitive supplier, whether you're buying it from Community Power, that pay for the overhead, pay for the service providers that are supplying you with that power. This slide just shows the outline of the chapters. There's a lot of really good educational material, so I encourage folks to go to that link and read the plan. And the main body, there's 5 chapters, but they're fairly brief. The introduction, the overview, a summary of the coalition, the goals and objectives, and then what is required by law to be in the plan. There are also a number of educational attachments that have a lot of good sort of context on background on legislative stuff and some of the details of how some of the technical services will be implemented. So some key terms. So I've used this term default electricity provider. This is a key term. Right now there's a default. It is the investor-owned regulated monopoly utility, Eversource, and they provide that sort of regulated 6-month supply rate that tends to be have a little bit of added cost in it. This is the new default, where any customer who's on that Eversource rate would then be enrolled in the Portsmouth Community Power default, unless they chose a different supply option, which choice they would continue to have that choice. Customers would be able to opt in to products above the default, and that's potentially like Clean 50, a 50% renewable product, Clean 100, 100% renewable. And then again, potentially over time, there's this opportunity to expand products, whether that is power sourced from a local generator, or things like, we see some of the more mature markets, again, looking at deploying battery storage into homes for resiliency purposes that can also, shift your usage away from high-cost times to low-cost times, time of use rates. We don't need to get into the weeds on these things, but for us energy geeks, they could be exciting opportunities. Let's see, what else? What other points here? I mentioned the self-funded through the rates, no taxpayer funds, and the city having the overall governance authority and being able to execute contracts for services.
I just would add, too, all of this is in the energy aggregation plan, and that's with the agenda tonight on the city website. Also, if you just Google City of Portsmouth Energy Aggregation Plan, you should be able to read the whole document. It's about 67 pages.
Very good. Let's see. Okay, yes. So this is a key slide, the customer and notification and enrollment process. This is all standard and required by law, but if and when the city of Portsmouth jumps through all the hoops, brings this plan to city council, reviews it, approves it, and then does due diligence and decides to move forward with a service provider, what would happen is every customer in the city of Portsmouth would receive a mailed notification. It says, "Welcome to Portsmouth Community Power. Here is our electric rate compared to Eversource's electric rate. We're going to save you money on your power. Here's some information about the program, and here are your instructions if you want to choose to not participate. Go to this web link, call this phone number, send an email to this account or this address, and you can opt out." This notice will go to all electric customers. Importantly, the customers who already shop for power with a competitive electric power supplier, they will remain unaffected, and they will continue to be a part of that program that they're already in. They could choose to opt into the program if they would want to. And then similarly, because this is the new default, as new utility customers come online, they would periodically be notified and given the option to opt out or be enrolled into the program. And again, voluntary, any customer could choose to leave the program without penalty. This slide just shows an illustrative example of what some of the product options would be. And again, those first 8 communities are likely going to have these all available to them with fixed rates and prices in just a few short months. So Portsmouth could choose, for example, to have Granite Basic, which would be likely the cheapest default product with the minimum amount of renewable energy as allowed by state law, or Granite Plus, which is a higher renewable energy content that it could be offered on a default basis to the customers. And then as I mentioned previously, any customer could choose a 50% or 100% green product if they wanted to sort of act with their dollars to invest in a clean energy future. Okay, so the coalition. This is the community-governed new nonprofit power supplier that was created very recently, just October 1st, 2021. It was incorporated. And it's for communities, by communities. It was created by an initial 14 New Hampshire cities and towns. That membership has since grown to 28 cities, towns, and counties. And it represents a significant portion of the state population. So it's more than 20%, perhaps 21% of the population of the state is represented in those members. And that's approximately 125,000 electric customers, significant volume of electricity, and that translates to approximately $140 million in annual revenue. So this just is to represent the buying power of these communities collectively, and importantly, through this nonprofit coalition model, the revenue and the cash flow associated with the sale of electricity to these customers is controlled and overseen by those members collectively. So each member, Portsmouth included, appoints representatives to the board of directors of Community Power Coalition. So Kevin Charette and Peter Rice are representatives to the board of directors of the coalition. We also have Lisa Sweet from Rye, who is on the board. And these community leaders, they are overseeing the startup of the agency, all of the, they set the budget, they run the solicitations to hire service providers. And when power begins to flow in these initial communities, the sort of quote-unquote net profit from the sale of electricity will be accrued in financial reserves controlled by these communities and held on their behalf. I think there's a slide that gets to this point, so I might just hold my comments. Let's see, is that, yeah, I'm gonna hold my comments on that, but it's a exciting benefit for participating communities. I described sort of the 8 to 12 communities that are looking at going live this spring, and then there's an additional 15 that are running on the field towards a 2024 launch. This slide just illustrates those collective community leaders that are sitting on the board of directors and, providing the governance and oversight to this new agency. And I'll just note, there's a real breadth and depth of experience and expertise. We have former representatives and senators and regulators, former utility executives, business entrepreneurs who have founded energy companies, attorneys, engineers, forester, policy professionals. There's a really great breadth and depth from all across the state, folks who have worked in oil and gas, folks who have worked in renewables, academia, and they're coming together in the board and its committees to put this into motion. So there's real involvement from all of the participating communities from across the state. So that was sort of governance. This slide is really about operations and the expert contractors that have been enlisted through the coalition's competitive solicitations, through its request for proposal for services and credit support. So there's a number of service categories. Ascend Analytics will manage power procurement and really energy portfolio risk management. They're responsible for monitoring the wholesale market day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, and then recommending the most advantageous power contracts to be entered into on behalf of these communities. Calpine Energy Solution, and a number of these firms have extensive experience providing services to other community power agencies across the country and to some of the largest utilities in the company and energy service companies in the country. So there's a really, the solicitation process really drew a lot of excitement from the industry, and it was quite a competitive pool. So there's some great talent that is supporting this endeavor. Calpine Energy Solutions, that's retail customer services primarily, as well as the load serving entity services. But that's there's data exchange and data management required with the utility companies, close partnerships with the utilities really to receive customer data on and to bill customers through the utility company. Clean Energy New Hampshire is a local nonprofit that is supporting some of the engagement with cities and towns across the state. There's a couple of great law firms, a couple of startup consultants, including myself and Samuel Golding of Community Choice Partners, who's been a real leader in helping to start this model up here in the state, and accounting and banking services. So River City Bank providing banking services, and there's also an ongoing search for the CEO of the coalition. So that is likely to come to resolution potentially in March, which is exciting. Okay, so this is something I mentioned briefly previously about the accrual of reserve funds. So on the left, this pie chart is illustrating a typical bill, the gray portion being the Eversource delivery charges that remain unchanged, and then the blue portion being the energy supply charges that are now controlled by the communities under this model. If you take that blue part of the pie chart and you move over to the bar chart, the bar chart is representing only the energy supply. The blue portion of that bar chart, that's the, and again, this is illustrative. The blue portion of that bar chart, that's the dollars that are flowing to the purchase of electricity. There's a thin gray bar, that's the overhead, the cost of whether it's your competitive electric power supplier or whether it's the coalition's vendors. There's an overhead cost in everybody's electric bill that's built into that electric bill. The green bar on top is the accrual of reserves. So if this was purchasing power from a private competitive electric power supplier, that green bar would represent the 8, 12, 15% net profit that that company is accruing for their services. Under the coalition model, that represents reserves that are accrued by these communities and held on their behalf through the coalition in reserve for those communities' benefit. This is important for a couple of reasons. The first is that by capturing that net profit or those reserve funds, you can maintain rate stability over time. So if the market changes, you can sort of lean on your rainy day fund and the reserves. Over time, moreover, those reserve funds can be used to leverage investment into local projects and programs. Some of these community power agencies are contracting to develop community scale generation, renewable energy projects in their neighborhood or in their state. Some of them are investing in enhanced energy efficiency programs for residents and businesses to further lower electric bills. So there's a lot of possibility for what can be achieved through those reserve funds. And again, I just want to sort of qualify this. Again, it says like 10-cent supply rate on this chart. This was created before the market spiked to, I think, 22 cents for Eversource right now. And this is really just an educational graphic. If folks are interested, there is a technical assessment by Ascend Analytics that has a real breakdown of the financial forecast of the coalition that's much more detailed, and that could be made available. This is just really summarizing some of what we've discussed, but if you look at the green part of this graphic, this is showing Portsmouth Community Power, the committee developing the plan, offering that plan to City Council for approval. And what City Council's job is to approve that plan after doing its due diligence, but also appointing the representatives to the coalition board of directors. So that's sort of the down in the blue represents the coalition. This is the community governed board and the expert service providers that manage all of the technical back end of buying power and supplying it to customers. And really just providing the comprehensive services to run the program. So the coalition will purchase power in the ISO New England market. Eversource will deliver that power and, bill the customers and meter electricity and all the things that Eversource does. And that power will flow back to the residents and businesses. And then the last piece here is there is a state approval. The Public Utility Commission has to approve this electric aggregation plan.
Henry?
Yes.
So just a quick question. You were talking before about the net profits being as a reserve fund for various activities. How does the coalition, or what role does the coalition have with regard to New Hampshire Saves, which is the energy efficiency programs of the utilities?
It's a good question. At present, none. And what's being referred to is that all of us on our electric bills pay a small amount of money every month into an NH Saves fund that utilities then administer to help folks invest in more efficient lighting or heating systems or weatherizing their buildings. And this is all under the objective of lowering costs overall. If we can, use less energy, then we'll save money by not having to expand infrastructure in the future. So right now the coalition will have nothing to do with that. However, in Massachusetts, there is a community power program, Cape Light Compact, out on Cape Cod, and rather than the Mass Saves or their NH Saves funds going to Eversource to then Eversource distribute among the communities, in Cape Cod, that money goes to Cape Light Compact, which is sort of the equivalent of Community Power Coalition, and they then deploy those funds for energy efficiency projects and programs within their communities. So there's examples of crossover. That doesn't exist in any way in New Hampshire at present. So timeline. This committee has been doing a lot of work the past year, perhaps a year plus, on researching this, on integrating and connecting with communities across the state, and working with the coalition and its committees, and developing this draft plan. This is, as we discussed, the first of 2 public hearings, with the next being a week from today. And after those public hearings, the plan could be brought to City Council for a vote. And I understand there's also a City Council work session. And after the plan is adopted and also approved by the state within a 60-day timeframe, then the City Council would have the authorization to implement the program. And I think that ends the slide portion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or discuss any items.
Thank you, Henry. We're going to have time for everybody to speak to, for, or against, or just ask questions. We can break now for questions, or we can continue to share the survey data. We did a citywide survey mailed to every house, and we can share those results. But we'll pause if anybody has questions on Henry's material. Okay.
I actually have a question. So right now, I get my power from a third-party supplier. Is there a procedure in place, or will there be, by the time this rolls out, for me to be able to opt in?
There will be, and what you would want to do is understand if there is a penalty or an exit fee with that service provider that you're with right now, and then whether there was or not, you could terminate that contract, pay the fee, or maybe there is no fee, and then you could go to the Portsmouth Community Power enrollment website. This is part of what the coalition sets up for all the members, and just type in your utility account number and click opt-in, and then you would be enrolled into the program.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Henry, I've had a question from a resident who didn't get the postcard for the survey and said, how am I going to be sure that I get notice of the changeover? And my answer was, I believe that if you're a utility customer, that your address will be mailed. Would that be the best answer for that?
That's correct. So that's part of the utility partnerships. The utilities, under the rules and the law, share lists of all customer accounts, mailing addresses, with authorized programs, and then those programs issue mailed notification to all the electric customers in the community. And the first ones of those are likely going to be going out within a month or so for those first 8 communities.
So I suppose that that's an advantage of being a fast follower, as we could see that everybody in the first towns gets their notification, and if not, what the fixes for that will be. Any other questions for Henry? Peter?
Yes, so I'm net metering right now, which means that the excess energy that I generate that I don't use is sold back to Eversource, and on their bill, they give me credit for that. I assume that's also going to happen in the community power model.
Yes, and this is addressed in the plan in general terms, and as these programs are new and going live for the first time in the state, the law does require certain data sharing between utilities and community power programs. let's just say we're working through with the utilities the appropriate data sharing to ensure net metering customers do get appropriate service. In the event that some of the outstanding issues with data sharing with utilities with regard to net metering customers are not resolved prior to the launch of these first programs, those net metering customers would not be automatically enrolled until such time as we had sorted out the data sharing for net metering customers with utilities, if that makes sense. So if there is any possibility of enrolling net metering customers in an unfavorable manner to those customers because of some of the back-end details, then it would not occur.
Okay. And now we'll go to the survey data, and Allison Tanner of our committee is going to present the results of this. We did the survey because we wanted to know what you as residents would like to see in a community power program and what your priorities were, so that we could build those into the energy aggregation plan. Allison?
Yeah, so this is just going to be a brief overview of what we've found out so far. We've still got some of the surveys coming in. Next slide. So we have so far actually 389 respondents, but we've taken into account here 373, which is a pretty good number. And the far majority of people are Portsmouth homeowners. However, we have some that are tenants, some landlords, some businesses, and then we have other. And the other category is just people that have more than one, they're a landlord as well as being a homeowner in the city of Portsmouth. Next slide.
Oh, Allison?
Yes.
Can you, just because the black is not so easily readable back here, can you just say it each time as you go down so people know where you are?
Okay. You mean just read down the list?
Well, yeah, as you're going down, you can,
You mean read the percentages?
Is that what you want?
well, mainly the black headings there.
Oh,
above-
okay,
Above the
okay.
graphs.
Okay, sure. So the top one, okay, that's all right. We'll go to the next one. So the next one is, who is your energy supplier? And almost 80% of the people that responded had Eversource as their energy supplier. However, there was 20% that had third-party suppliers, which I thought was pretty high. I was surprised by that. And then there were 2 people that didn't know. Another question that we asked was, if your answer to question 1 was Eversource, why did you make that choice? So it was sort of evenly split between the first reason and, no, actually, the first reason was the highest, and that was, I didn't know I had an option. And there were 151 or 40% that said that. Others said they had no reason to look for a different supplier. Some said, I tried to switch but could not find a supplier with better rates. There were some people that just checked other, and some of the things that fell under that category were laziness, lack of trust, third-party rates were higher at the time, or they didn't know how to change. And then not applicable is the group, again, that did not choose Eversource as their supplier. So when we asked which option would be most important to you in the Portsmouth Community Power Program, this is where there were 2 that were fairly evenly split, and that's the third and the fourth bar. I mean, the first and the fourth bar. So lowest cost energy option was about 33%, and the same or lower cost with more renewable energy content than I have today was 36%. The others were 50% renewable energy, and then 100% renewable energy that may or may not cost more, and surprisingly, that was almost 20% of the people polled. And then other, in that category, I think the thing that really stuck out was reliability, that people felt that reliability was really important. And then another part of the survey, we asked ranking from 0 to 10, what was the highest priority for you with each of these questions? And so this is just done in bar charts, and what we did was we took the amount of votes sort of in each of those bars and came up with averages. And so the ability to increase energy efficiency and reduced costs came in with an average of about 8.7. So that was, 10 is the highest priority. So that's up there. And the next one, which was, again, right up there, was control of energy costs. So that was 8.6 as a priority. And also, everyone was interested in increasing renewable energy sources, and including locally generated. So that was at 7.4, which was a respectable amount, I believe. So, we did this survey to try to find out what people really wanted from community power, and that's why we're having these hearings, too, to hear from you what your concerns are, what your desires are. So your input is really valued. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I would just call out that if it's possible that we can get more green energy at the same Eversource default price, the total of who would want that in the survey is 62%. So if we can achieve that through community power, I think that would be something that the majority of our citizens would like.
I
Okay.
just wanted to comment two things. One, you mentioned 20% were on competitive supply, Allison, and I was just looking at our data for the city, and it's like 16%. So the survey is pretty close to the actuals in the town.
Yeah.
And having a return of 400 or so, we will get to 400, is a pretty good sample size for the city, and I think, useful for all of us in terms of what it's telling us. And also, I want to thank Allison. She has taken the lead on this survey and has driven that with us, over the past few months, and I think it's been very helpful. So
With
thank you.
Stephanie's help as well.
Absolutely. Stephanie's involved with everything.
Yes. Any other questions for Allison or comments on the survey? All right, well, let's now hear from residents. Anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against community power and the energy aggregation plan, just state your name and your address, and it's your turn.
I say full speed ahead.
Oh, well, to get you on the record, we need you to come up to the microphone, your name and address.
David Sanderson.
Yes, David.
248 Spinney Road, Portsmouth.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should add that we're not just looking for criticism, though we're here for that too. But if someone has an idea of something we haven't thought of or like to see included, this is a vehicle too to increase and improve the plan we have. So don't feel if you don't have something you want to criticize, you can't provide some constructive input.
Okay. Any others?
Any hands raised?
No hands on Zoom? Okay.
Can I give David's comment?
Sure.
Can I just second that?
We know who you are, but you should probably still.
Rebecca O'Brien, 396 Miller Ave, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Full transparency, used to be on this committee and had to step off. But I just wanted to commend the committee's work on this progress, and full steam ahead, I say. And I wanted to thank Henry, too. You answered a lot of the questions that I had about what happens if you do have a third-party supplier, and how does that work? Can you opt into the program? So that was really helpful. I was very curious to hear about what can maybe happen with New Hampshire Saves as well, so thank you for speaking to that. And I'm excited about this reserve fund portion or addition, I don't know if it's an addition, but as part of the electric aggregation plan. I think that's really exciting to have that possibility of potentially, maybe in the future, sourcing local energy. So yes, full steam ahead, and just wanted to offer my absolute 100% support for this program. So.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you for all the work that you've given us. Others who'd like to speak? Going once?
Sorry. I just want to, just a comment, because I know we have a lot of questions on that survey to say, you know, would you be willing to have renewable energy even if it costs more than the other options? There's actually a very encouraging trend that if you look at the PUC's website a couple of days ago, and you wanted 100% green energy, it's already 3 cents cheaper than the default rate is. So it's like, it's not a brainer anymore to say, okay, I want renewable energy, but I want it at a lower cost. You can already get it at a lower cost from third-party suppliers. And interestingly enough, that was a trend, I think, that started maybe 5-6 years ago, where renewable energy was maybe 2 cents more expensive than default, and it became 1 cent, and then was 1 cent under. And now, recently, I think 3 months ago, it was 5 cents difference lower. And now you had to commit yourself to 2 years, but there was no cancellation fee. So that's an encouraging sign that the renewable energy sources are now very competitive and are willing to underbid default service.
The cheapest electrons win. Other 2, 4, or against?
Henry, when you were talking about new technologies coming online in battery storage and things, you know, I've heard a lot lately about bidirectional charging. So is that something that, you know, is you know, you're looking at as maybe something to bring forward, one of those technologies?
It could be. Really, anything that can allow customers to intelligently shift their energy usage so they're not drawing power from the grid at high cost times, or, as you're describing, if they are putting power onto the grid at high cost times, those matter. Those are values that can be achieved. I don't know a whole lot about the specifics of the technology of bidirectional charging, like an electric vehicle that could actually feed power into the grid. I think there might be legislation in the New Hampshire State House this year. There might be a bill that addresses this. But it's a good example of the kinds of things where if we had more intelligent electric vehicle charging rates or distributed batteries, all of these things can help to lower the overall portfolio cost.
Thank you.
Counselor, just, and Henry, you may have mentioned it, but I think one of the advantages of the coalition, among many, is the kind of the aggregate voice of all the communities with the PUC and the state legislature to kind of speak with a unified voice around trying to influence smart and progressive energy policy within the state, to the point, Allison, you were just making. And I think it gives, you know, a community like Portsmouth a much bigger hammer, if you will, being part of the coalition to influence. So I think that's, you know, that's a real benefit as well.
Yep, agreed.
And Henry, if a community used some of its reserves or structured its reserve in a way that it would long-term fund solar arrays or hydropower or anything like that, would the coalition buy that power and then sell it back to that community's customers? Is that how that would work?
Essentially, yes, and I'll just clarify a little bit. So the structure of the coalition and this statewide collaboration, it is about long-term benefits, and it's really balancing short-term and long-term benefits. So there is a period of time where the reserves must accrue to a certain threshold to really just maintain stability. Beyond that point in time, the reserves could be used for projects. And this is a little bit nuanced, but rather than taking the reserve fund and spending that cash on a solar array, for example, what's more likely is that reserve fund would be held by the communities through the coalition, and it would be the collateral or really a credit or a enhancement, a financing mechanism, so that a developer and a financier, they would spend their capital, build the project, and then sign a 10-year contract or a long-term contract with Portsmouth, let's say, to buy that power for 10 years. So this is a little roundabout answer, but yes, you could have somebody build a local project, and then Portsmouth could contract with that developer and then source their power from that project. The reserve wouldn't necessarily be the cash that pays for the project, but it enables those projects to occur.
And would that then enable the city to go to the bond market and get revenue anticipation notes to fund the project?
Yeah, this is a really key point. So a number of the communities are very excited about the ability to revenue bond and self-finance projects in this way, and this is possible under the law and regulation for these programs.
Thank you. Other questions?
Can I just offer a little perspective for the future, perhaps? I mean, going forward now, just because, Henry, you just mentioned energy usage. It's worth reminding us that only 30% of energy use is electricity right now. The other 70% is transportation and heating. And those could be areas that the coalition could look into once we're up and running. How can we also be an aggregator for those kind of things? I'm thinking, for example, of the fact that there are all kinds of new technologies around hydrogen and ammonia storage as instead of electric batteries for transportation, for example. Also, since I'm on the Offshore Wind Commission, 5 to 6 years from now, we'll have offshore wind off the coast of Maine. And I would assume the coalition would have the ability to sign a procurement agreement with that wind supplier that we could get from them.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot in that question, and yes, energy is a really broad topic, and there are a lot of different aspects to this. There are a number of exciting things that can be brought to light through these programs over time. I don't want to sort of overpromise or over-speculate on any one individual technology. I'm not an expert in hydrogen technologies or things like that. I will say that the folks who are in the wind industry and looking at the development of offshore wind in the state have contacted folks at the coalition to understand what it is that is being created here, and if the coalition could potentially be a counterparty or a buyer for the electricity that could be generated from that type of a project. My understanding of those projects are quite some time off in development, but you do now have a buyer in the coalition at scale that could potentially be a counterparty to large generators such as offshore wind.
Keeping it simple in the near term, I look at it, it's almost, there's very little risk in this direction. It gives all of our residents another option. They can stay with Eversource, they can go with a competitive supplier, or they're going to have a choice of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. That'll have a default rate that beats the utility, and if they're interested in green, they're going to have some additional choices. So that's like right now. That's happening, at the beginning of 2023, and all of that goodness is you can't argue with, and then all the other things we're talking about in terms of new technologies is also wonderful, but downstream.
And Henry, if somebody wants to go to a third-party supplier right now, they often have to buy a year or even multi-year contracts. If somebody goes onto the default as CPCNH and Portsmouth Community Power, talk a little bit about the flexibility that they have if they want to change.
It's full flexibility. They can change any month, no fee. They can go and shop for a competitive supplier or choose to buy power from Eversource. So fully competitive, fully flexible, and they have the options of other menu items that Portsmouth Community Power would provide.
I think that was one of our considerations when we looked at, should we do Portsmouth Community Power through a broker? But customers wouldn't have the flexibility they have with CPC Energy. It's totally open flexibility.
And just to build on that a little bit, so part of the benefit of this coalition model is essentially this is its own competitive energy supplier that is owned and controlled by the communities. And what that means is rather than having to lock into like a 24-month contract, the coalition can adjust rates over time and it can manage its portfolio. It's got different contracts of different terms with different generators, and because of that, it can adjust rates over time. This is important because, you could lock in a 24-month rate that looks really good today, and then in 6 months, the market could fall, the utilities could go back in and come in with a rate that's actually lower than whatever you locked into. And that's a risk, and we've seen that in some of the other markets that are just doing one 24-month or 36-month contract through a broker. It can be beneficial, and there are instances where it can be a risk, and the utilities could come in with lower rates. The coalition is a model that really protects against that with its flexibility.
Right, especially with the reserves for, keeping prices stable, too. In addition to smart buying and portfolio management, buffering any shocks with the reserve. Other questions, comments? We appreciate the people who've come out tonight. David, Ellie, Becca, Lisa, nice to see you all.
I might say I'm 95, and I'm hoping to see something happen while I'm still around.
You will.
We're on it, David.
Yep, we should get busy then, right now. We've got about 10 years probably, from the looks of you, at least.
Do we have any other business for the committee tonight? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And just a reminder, we have a second hearing, the 9th of February, and currently that's at 6:30, as it's posted, correct? 6.
Six.
Oh, it's been changed to 6, okay. 6 PM, City Hall, Thursday, the 9th. And we welcome more comments from the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.